Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, but no matter what, happy Friday to everybody. Happy
Any of them,
Friday.
take your pick.
Take your pick. Wherever you are in the world, that's got to work for you somehow. It is Friday. It is Beyond the Sim. I'm Shaun Cole. That's my buddy, Billy Strange. Billy, how are you doing today?
Oh, great. It's going to be a bit noisy, probably. I have painters coming to paint the outside of the house and at any time, so I had to bring the dogs in, and I have one staring. Oh, she's behind the mic.
Aww, hi.
Oh, now my arm's in the way. I'll get it one way. She's there, and then my other one is like laying down behind me, and the male decided he had enough and went and laid down like a good boy.
And they're just like, what are we doing, Dad? What are we doing? Why are there
Changing
people?
the routine.
There are people outside, and we're in here. This is outrageous.
Yes, and the door is open. No, Dan, because they'll wander in and out. I don't trust the new one down here laying down. Yes, I see both of you. Thank you. Okay, yes, thanks. Oh, yes, dogs.
Yeah, who's a good boy? Who's a good boy? Too cool. All right, where's my dog? Why isn't he sitting here loyally? Damn it. He worthless. Oh, so what have you been?
Listen.
Yeah, he just sleeps now. That's all he does. So we are here from Beyond the Sim. We're here to talk about sim racing, and we always start off with, what have you been doing? Billy Strange, have you been able to race, or are things too crazy over there?
We haven't talked in a couple weeks, so
2 weeks.
Oh, what did we do? I don't know. I can't even remember. I went backpacking last weekend.
Right, that's where you
that.
were. Yeah.
Yep. That was fun. Boy, that was hard. We did a trail that was just, I had no idea. It said moderate. It was pretty difficult. It was nothing but up and downhill, pretty much climbing rocks the whole time. And I was like, oh, this is a really bad first hiking trip for my wife.
You mean all of your sim racing prep? Oh, for your wife, not for you. Okay,
yeah,
gotcha.
Not for me.
Okay, I was gonna say your sim racing.
I was all right. I was a little sore because we backpacked for 3 days, so I was a little sore after that. But my poor wife, she was a trooper, but it was difficult.
You have quite the wife. We need to meet her someday. She used to race. She lets you do your thing, and she backpacks. That's a keeper.
Yeah, I'm pretty lucky.
That's a keeper.
Yeah, she's pretty good about being, I don't know. She's not too picky about the situation that she's in. She'll pretty much get along with anything that's going.
She even mounted all your wheels on the wall.
I know. How do you let that one get away?
Awesome. So backpacking, obviously you didn't do any sim racing when you were there.
No, but I did. One of the things is I went back to NASCAR Heat 4 because they released an update that fixed that major vibration. And so I tried that again, and it makes it better.
Okay.
It's still, obviously, I still have problems with other things, but it's good enough to kind of just play around with every once in a while. Just if you're really looking for some stock car action, you can jump in. It still has, problems that most hardcore sim racers will not overlook.
Right.
It is what it is. And then ran the Porsche Cup car, did a video on that.
It sounds like you're not a lover of Heat 4, but that we don't have to earmuff the concept of mentioning the word heat anymore to you. Is that about the? I mean, did they make that kind of leap essentially?
I would say so. I will give them credit. In my opinion, they definitely made an improvement over 3. And again, I try to look at context sensitive in what that game is trying to accomplish. And I would argue a little bit that they said they were really focusing on the PC and making that a better product, but they're still missing PC things, in my opinion.
Right.
So that's where I fault them, because they said that's where they were going. It is not uncommon anymore to have a field of view sliders. I mean, first-person shooters There's several games that have FOV sliders. There's no reason not to have one, especially in a racing title.
Right.
Me, that is not a simulation thing anymore. At least I don't think.
That, I say that about controller settings all the time. It's like, if you're going to make a game, how do you not look at all the other game companies out there and add the most basic features that they have that are just totally doable? It's like, can we just call certain features, certain settings, certain things like that, like the bare bone basics? And I think they do a better job of that in the regular gaming world, and that sim companies do a little less. I don't even know if they play or watch the other games and what they do. Like, they're so in their world. And
and that is an odd. You're exactly right. And I've had several conversations with developers about that particular subject, and we had one of them on air when Paul Coleman was with the Dirt franchise, and he said yes. But then I've also talked to other devs that go, no, we don't want to be like tainted or whatever. I'm like, but how do you know if what you're doing is like going to be in line? Not that it has to be just like theirs, but how do you know what you're doing is, how do you know what you don't like, I guess is my point.
Right.
Like when I started building slot car tracks, I drove a bunch of hand routed wood tracks, and I figured out what I did and what I didn't like. So when I started building mine, I had a basic concept of, I'm not going to do this and I'm not going to do this.
Right.
This is how I'm going to build my track. But if I was to stay insular and in my own bubble, I would have never known those things, and I might have done those things.
Right.
So it's like, why not speed up your learning curve a little bit and just pay attention to what other people are doing? You don't have to do exactly what they're doing, but you can definitely sit there and go, I like that, I don't like that.
Right.
So
right. Yeah. Yeah, Tim just nailed it. I saw a bunch of people asking, might as well cover shirts. If I'm not mistaken, that's a Jägermeister, 935 Porsche?
Yeah, yes.
That's a beauty. And this is Exotic Racing, my new favorite place in the world to hang out. So I got you, Billy Strange.
Yes.
Yes, John. Billy actually builds a mean slot car track. I've never driven it, but we've had deep discussions about track building.
That's what I had in my store, and I've built some for other people. The ones in the store, or at least one of them in the store, was fully landscaped and the whole thing. That takes a lot of time. I mean, that track, if I was to sell the track in the store, which was 12 by, I think it was 28, something like that. That's the footprint.
Right.
It would have been, I would have charged about $32,000 for that thing.
Wow.
Yeah.
I love the concept of I don't know how high my interest for slot car racing is, as much as I'd love to build an over-the-top, elaborate, diorama-ish, track, and I'd have a good time. I have no desire to play with model trains, but I would love to build an elaborate model train track. There would be no fun for me in driving the train even. It's just, to me, the building would be so cool to build a micro. There's that place in Germany, Micro World or something. And it's just all these operational cityscapes and an airport, but it's all super scale, model stuff. And I'm I could do that all day long, I think.
Well, and that's what we tried to do with the store. It's like sim racing. I'll kind of relate this back to in my Porsche Cup video. I don't think I'm going to get into that one, but I did take a look at the Nordschleife and Le Mans. And I think there's a different, it sounds silly, but there's a different atmosphere that I don't often feel with other tracks, and even the same track in other sims. I thought they did a really excellent job on modeling both of those. And that's how I looked at when I built the track for the store. We wanted you to feel like you were going somewhere. It's not just this flat plastic thing. I mean, our tracks have camber, off camber. They have hills. I mean, it goes up and down. It's not a flat static track because you can
Right.
only make so many corner combinations. That's just the way, that's just reality. But when
Right.
you start out adding elevation changes, and then we would put, landscaping in, it just changes and transforms what you're doing. So you can equate that to, well, a good example is Long Beach and iRacing, right? Technically, you
Right.
can drive around that track, but are you fully immersed in the situation that you're in? Well, no.
Right. Right.
And that's kind of the difference. So that's why, that particular track would have been $32,000, is because the amount of labor that ends up getting put into that. And if you look at, there's another place. Oh no, I can't remember their names. Slot Mods. I don't remember, but he does high-end slot car tracks, and he charges hundreds of thousands of dollars
Right.
for his tracks, and they're amazing.
Are those the ones? I think I saw one on like Jay Leno Garage.
Where the car, some of them like he'll do inside the car, or Bobby Rahal has a pretty, if you've
Right.
seen his, he has an amazing looking one.
Right.
His, I don't think are more set pieces. Mine were more racetracks. So whenever I would build one, I built some for people, not at the $32,000 level. It's usually about 10, 12. Because I won't do the landscaping. I don't like doing the landscaping.
If I were super wealthy and building a man cave, I would have one of those built for me. And it's like, yeah, I want that in the man cave, and whether it even gets used or not, it doesn't matter, because I'd probably have it built to a specific track. And it's like, instead of having the laser cut wood outline on my wall like everyone else, no, I've got this beautiful scale replica of the track. And then might as well make it functional if you're going to do that.
Well, yeah. And so like the one we did was Road Atlanta.
Mm-hmm.
So I've done one on Road Atlanta. I did one on.
Oh, talk about elevation change.
Yeah. So dude, my track had like 19 inches, 22 inches of elevation change from the lowest point in the track to the highest point of the track.
That's awesome.
So I did Magello. I've done Riverside, Watkins Glen. I'm missing one, and I can't remember what it was. But anyway. And then I've done some fictional ones where I've kind of pushed a couple tracks together. Like I did one for somebody that was Interlagos, but they only had a very small amount of space, so I had to take out some of the corners and stuff. Right. But even that one we did. You're back again, huh? Hello. Even that one from the bottom part which I always make the straightaway or the fastest part of the track on the backside. It just helps give you that sense of speed, and that way you're not sitting here when it comes by you don't go like this.
Right.
Breaks your neck. But that one I think had like 17 inches of elevation change, and it was a relatively short space. So I don't know. I equate some of those things that I learned doing the tracks from sim racing. Like I pulled pieces from sim racing and thought about, I want a good racetrack, and I want people to feel immersed as possible, or as much as possible. Man, tripping over my words. When I build those things. So yeah.
People would ask what scale tracks did you?
132nd. Okay. 132nd. So Scale Electric, Carrera, Slotted, MR or Mr. Slot Car, NSR, all those. That's the ones, when I had my store, that's what we specialized in.
Right. And I apologize, someone corrected me. You don't drive, you operate trains.
Operate the trains. Yes.
I gotta get
I forget that.
I gotta get my lingo right.
Right.
All right.
Yeah, I don't know. It was really cool when I did Watkins Glen, because I literally used a sim.
Right.
To help me figure out how I wanted to plan out Watkins Glen. So I don't know. Like the two for me cross over really well.
That would be fun. I would totally do that. And then I'd have to give it away probably, because I'd be like, wow, look, this takes up a shit ton of space. Oh, push-ups.
Yeah, that's usually the problem is people. I was at some guy's apartment that did Monaco, and it literally took up his whole living room and dining room. He was
you
obviously
put on
single.
pulleys and have it go up to the ceiling.
I've done that for somebody.
Yeah.
I did that in somebody's garage.
That would be kind of cool. It would kind of sway though when it was down, I guess. But that's
No,
not.
you just no. When it drops down, I just put supports underneath. So you just drag out a couple sawhorses, or there was a video online where a guy did the same thing, but he had it sit on his furniture.
Okay.
So you wouldn't, where the slot car track was, you wouldn't even be able to sit on the furniture anymore anyway. So he just left the furniture there and then sat it on top of the furniture so that the cables still supported it,
but
it
it
was also
stabilized it.
by the
Yeah.
furniture.
Oh, that's genius.
I did one that flipped away from the wall for somebody.
Right. Oh, like a Murphy track?
Yep. Pretty much. You can't have much elevation change when you do that, but yeah.
Right. Right. Or it's still going to take up a lot of room. Oh, that's awesome. That is awesome. And a perfect, I'm always thinking of the parallels to sim racing. It's no shock that you get into slot cars. I think a lot of people in sim racing have dabbled in or dreamt of doing various different slot car things. Because, again, it's another form of racing. It's another form of simulated racing. And you got to love it. RC cars, race cars, bumper cars, slot cars, go-karts. It doesn't matter. We'll race them. Awesome. Did you get to do any other driving in sims this week?
I messed around in Dirt Rally 2.0. I also did some driving in WRC 8 for that RFactor 2 video on the Porsche Cup car. I drove every other Porsche Cup cars in every other sim, but mainly the iRacing, Assetto Corsa, and Race Room. And I happened to hit the Race Room version right when they did the update.
Uh-huh.
So I even got to have a more updated opinion on the Race Room. And I'll just say what was interesting is I said it in the video, I would have likened the RFactor 2 version more closely to the Race Room version. But after the update, the Race Room version was more like every other version.
Right.
So that I just thought that was kind of a timing thing that I thought was interesting. Do an update right when the RFactor 2 one releases. Basically, it was like a handful of days later.
Yeah. What did you think? How much did you drive the new Nordschleife on RFactor 2?
I put in quite, so I was getting footage. I was getting B-roll for it. I did not use Nordschleife to test the car. I always use Zandvoort to do all my testing, but I also ran that car at the Nürburgring GP just to see what their version looked like as well. And it's nice looking. And then I like Nordschleife like I like a rally track. Does that make sense?
I'm not sure.
I don't want to race. Well, I don't like racing on the Nordschleife.
Right.
But I love driving a car.
Right. Yes.
As hard as I can around the Nordschleife.
Yes.
Because it's kind of like Monaco. I don't really think that's a great racetrack, but it is a great track, if that makes sense.
Makes perfect sense. And I feel the exact same way. In fact, I was even talking to Mitchie about Nordschleife, and it's like, what a stupid, ridiculous track to race on. There's no room to pass. There's no really setting somebody up because of the narrowness and the type of corners they are. They're unconventional racing corners. And it's a miserable track to race on. Like when they do endurance racing, especially like in iRacing, it's like, are you serious? Yeah, let's do multi-class. That's a smart idea.
And I think helps alleviate some of that because at least you have the part of the GP course to help facilitate some of those passes. But then kind of every time I've watched the 24-hour races or whatever they have that incorporate the part of the GP track, most of the passing is done on the GP course, but it's stunning to watch the cars go around the track. If you ever watch the Beloff lap that he did in the Porsche, the Group C car, I mean, those kind of things are really impressive. So I enjoy driving the car around the track. And to get back to your point, I found myself continuously driving the car even after the B-roll was done.
Oh, I've pissed people off now. I'm
good at doing that.
I think Nordschleife is one of the best. And I, like Billy said, I think of it more like it's no surprise that it's become the testing or battlegrounds for car manufacturers. The Porsche versus the Tesla, and it's like you have a new car. The first thing you do is go to Nordschleife and try to beat the class time for that type of car. And I get it, because like Pikes Peak, or like Billy said, a rally stage, it's like this.
That's what it reminds me of, is just that kind of mindset where I go out and I try, by myself
Yeah.
to run. I mean, you can race on the track, but that's kind of like,
Well,
saying you can race on the rally track to me.
You think of the tourist version, or Bridge to Gantry even,
Right.
and it's like, you know what, it's a time trial track is what it really is. I mean, yes, I know they've raced there forever. I get it. It's a track.
It's tradition, and I'm all down with tradition. I don't have anything against people racing on the track.
Right. And so
Monaco.
yeah, same thing. And Monaco, obviously a shorter version, but it's like, what a fun track to drive. Like, really fun to drive. But man, like, if I even do it in like a arcadey, like F1 2019 game, I have to like kind of bounce people out of my way a little bit. It's like,
Right. Well, I kind of think of it like an indoor karting track. A lot, not all, but a lot of indoor karting tracks, there's not a lot of room. You can barely fit 2 karts wide.
Right.
So it's kind of that same thing, and you end up bumping people and kind of moving them out of the way. And I don't really feel like that's, if I have to do that to make a pass, I don't really feel like that's racing per se.
No, you're moving. Yeah.
The only way you get by somebody is if they're incredibly slow or they completely blow the corner, right? And it's kind of the same thing in at Nords. It's kind of the same way.
Yep. I agree. Now, with that all said, when I drove the RFactor version, I don't know if you saw my stream or not, but one thing that struck me about that particular version of Nordschleife, it reminded me to when I used to mountain bike in a forest, and that effect you'd get of coming in and out of the trees, and in a lot of spots where it's rapidly blinking from bright to dark.
So I did my B-roll at like 7:00 in the evening, so the sun was coming through the trees, and you're right, it's exactly like that.
Oh, and I just thought this is the best. The other thing, I thought the elevation effect there to me was really awesome too. So I'm kind of, without comparing it directly to other versions of Nordschleife, but I've never been there in real life. But I was like, wow, I'm really getting a strong effect of the up and down and the elevation change that is a big part of what makes that such an awesome track. Yeah, I really enjoyed. I drove the RFactor 2 version the day it released. And had a really good time, but that version somehow seemed narrower than other versions.
Yeah, I didn't feel like that.
No,
I didn't get that. I'd heard you and some other people say that. I didn't get that out of the track. To me, it actually feels the most correct from watching the relationship of car to track.
Right.
So like in videos, when you see how narrow that track really is,
right,
there's not a lot of room. So there's give and take when those guys are racing. And when I was driving the track, it felt to me like the most correct that I've driven on. Like it's just funny that whatever they did to that version really captured the mystique, if you will, about the Nordschleife. And there are other versions that are really good. Race Room is another version that, when they released theirs, they had a lot of the atmospheric stuff on the sides,
right,
which I thought really lent to how well the track came across. And it's not like the iRacing version is terrible. Their version is really well done. So these aren't terrible versions. There's just, I'm not quite sure what it is. There's just some little thing that's going on with the RFactor 2 version that I liked aesthetically. I liked the look of the track.
Yeah. Well, it's another great work of art from Studio 397. Pixel, I would say the reason Bathurst doesn't make a lot of top 10 lists, but I bet it does make a lot of top 10 also, is because no one can finish a race there.
Bathurst is, Mount Panorama has an interesting cross-section because it kind of does the same thing, and I'm going to get this wrong. I think is it Cadwell that they call the mini Nords? Is that the right one?
I don't recall. I don't know.
But it's the track that has a lot of up and down. I love driving that track. But again, tracks like that and like Bathurst have a cross section where they have very difficult follow the leader sections of the track. And then they have other sections of the track where you can make it sets up for some really good racing passes.
Right.
I just think that a track like Monaco, a track like Nordschleife kind of takes the next step beyond those, where there are very limited places to make consistently a good pass without having a crash or an interaction with
Sure.
another car that could end up in somebody at least going off the track.
Sure, and that gets back to, so David Grunnell says, no surprise that David Grunnell's favorite tracks are Bathurst and Nords, because David Grunnell's an extremely great driver. And yes, Pixel, I think that's part of the point. It's almost more of a personal challenge track, or better for the, the whole upper section is more of a personal challenge track than it is a racing track. Because if you were in a tough battle on the bottom, you're going to have to...
It feels like a rhythm track.
Yeah, and it's a lot of fun because you miss a beat, and
Yep.
you miss a beat, and it takes a little while to collect yourself.
Yeah, I enjoy the heck out of running Bathurst,
Yeah.
especially that. It's funny because the top part of the track, you have to be good to set up yourself for the parts that you can pass in.
Right.
So I like Bathurst as well. And George is talking about Race Room's got another track coming out. I won't say what it is. I actually know the track that's coming, but and I've never heard of it. But apparently, like he's saying, it could be called the Mini Nordschleife as well.
Awesome.
So that'll be interesting. I've never heard of this track, so this will be cool.
Is this the one they posted a couple of teaser pictures, like guess what it is pictures, right? I think we've seen a couple of those.
Sure. I don't know. VT Racer, thank you.
Hey, VT, thank you very much. Where's my little updater? We got to get this thing updated. There we go. All right. Any other driving from you?
No, I will end up doing something on grid next week. I'm going to go ahead and get that.
All right.
Just to see. I want it to be fun. I'm hoping it's fun. Again, I will end up doing a review more than likely on it, and people will not everybody, but certain people won't quite understand what I'm getting that when I say I'm not looking at this. I'm looking at it through the lens of what the developer was trying to accomplish with it.
Right.
So any criticism that comes from it is not me trying to make it a sim.
Right. Right. Yeah, I guess I have to kind of clear my calendar and prepare for that one as well. I've contacted them a few times and I don't hear back, but I haven't been that kind to Codemasters in the last 12 months. So, although I will say I played F1 2019 the other day and really enjoyed it, like had fun, but I accepted it as being the Heat 4 of Formula 1.
Yeah. Fair enough.
So going into it with that mindset, and I'm like, okay, I'm not playing a hardcore simulator. I'm playing an arcade Formula 1 game with the thought of being simulation-esque. And with that said, yeah, and I also find that I do their challenges, and their challenges might be more fun than getting into the grind of the game.
Sure,
So
that makes sense. That's a goal.
Yeah, it's a goal. I walked in and it's like, okay, you have good tires. We made the right tire call for the weather, but we were back in like 15th place and I have to win the race, and everybody else a little off the pace on their wrong tires for mild weather. Tom loves pulling my quotes, the statements. We're going to have to put them all on one big board for 2019. That would take some time to assemble, but all right. So this week for me, I did all of my driving has been one of two focuses only. I got back to work on the Podium wheel review. So their software came out, and that's what I've been waiting for, to actually do the hardware review. And now that I have the software, I'm doing that. And for me, and anybody who's been watching on Twitch, I've driven iRacing, Assetto Corsa Competizione, RFactor, Codemasters, F1 2019, and Dirt Rally 2.0. So I've been all over the place with Sims, shaking down this wheel, playing with settings, getting it dialed in. But it means I got to play with a bunch of things, including Gosh, I just can't seem to get happy playing dirt. Rally 2.0.
Uh-oh.
Sorry, Cody's, but I just can't get comfortable in the wheel relationship. So anyway, the first part of the problem was the only wheel rim I have for Fanatic is the Formula rim. And so now I'm playing Dirt Rally 2.0 with the Formula rim.
That's probably all right.
Yeah, it was really stupid. I was using the bottom of the wheel, like literally, like I would flip it to here and then switch to the heel of my hand holding the bottom of the nubs.
Oh, man.
And then have to let go and fled it. But I need, anyway, then I finally did something super crazy. I do have a CSL Elite wheel rim. They're like hard plastic wheel rim that goes on their cheap wheel base. And
Okay.
And it has that metal clamp that holds it on instead of the quick release. And I'm like, well, technically that should work on the Podium.
Technically, that should be okay.
So I put it on there, and much to my amazement, it works way better than I thought. Yeah, it's not as solid as their others. It's a cheap rim, but all of a sudden, I'm like, all right, well, if you were the guy who had a carbon, Formula rim already, and you bought the Podium, or you bought the Podium and you bought a Formula style wheel, and you just were like capped out, I got no money. Well, this is the cheapest option to have a round wheel as a backup for whatever. Anyway, it worked out pretty well. All of a sudden, I enjoyed myself a bit more on Dirt Rally. Still got to get some settings right. So anyway, I've driven just about every sim this week and had a blast doing that because it's like, cool. Perfect excuse to try a bunch of things I wouldn't do. And then from there, it was on to preparing for the Petit Le Mans because I'm way behind on that. So I'm kind of trying to get out there and debating whether I'm going to run the Podium wheel or go back to, my tried and true sim experience wheel, which, I have, years of foundation of feel for. And I don't think it's that big a deal to switch from, let's face it, 2 high-end wheels. It's not that hard, boo-hoo. But, yeah.
Yes, way.
But no, I think I'm going to give it a go because that's the other thing. When it comes to reviewing, I feel like, I don't know however other hardware reviewer people are, but I like to put the wheel under that kind of pressure. Not just, la, 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 let's test. Oh, this feels nice. But I'm going to do my endurance race where it's for everything, that's as big a race as I do.
Sure, you're gonna see if there's any fade. You're gonna see if there's any issues that crop up from a longer run.
And racing with all the extra pressure and importance.
Sure.
It's like it also shows a certain level of faith in the wheel. Anyway, so that's been all my driving. Been testing a bunch of sims, but it's all been shaking down the Podium. And then preparing for Petit Le Mans, which, and I might as well plug it because tomorrow at 6 a.m. is when the race starts, or 6:30. It will be live on this channel, all 10 hours of the race. And I think we're back into a party car. We had 2 cars. We had a couple drivers who had injuries at the very end, believe it or not. 2 drivers out of the race due to injuries.
Sim racing's dangerous, man.
So we're back to a party car, which is always fun because it means it's a little less pressure when it's just cycling all the drivers through the car. It's like you're already kind of taking yourself out of contention for that, overall gung-ho-ness, but it becomes more fun because you got a crowd hanging out talking during the race. So it should be fun. It should make for a good stream. Real injuries. These are real injuries.
I don't know what would be a
Real Trisk says the CSL wheels auto limit the torque on the Podium though. That's funny because I immediately had to crank the force feedback up compared to what I was running percentage-wise in-game with the Formula rim. That makes total sense to me. So, all right, that's about all I had from racing, driving. I've done a lot this week. I moved the studio around again, and I don't know if you saw or remember, I built that elaborate rolling platform.
Yes.
I destroyed it.
Yeah, I had to get rid of it.
I destroyed it. It's going to be recycled into Deathmobile 2. So I'm like, hey,
Okay.
look at that. I already got all the wood I need. I think I can build a rig out of that wood. So yeah, Deathmobile 2 will be in the works now. Anyway, that's about it.
Nice. Sweet.
All right, should we move into some news? We have a few topics worth talking about today.
Yeah.
First up is this iRacing Downshift. This is their podcast. They copied us, huh? Let's straight up just call them copycats.
Jeez. There's nobody else that does podcasts.
Yes. It was Beyond the Sim that, in fact, before we move on to the news, one more thing we want to cover. So Billy, I understand that your work hours have changed.
Oh, yes. Yeah. That whole thing. Yes. So next week will be the last show that I can do consistently during the, it's 9 o'clock my time. So the company that I work for, I'm a purchasing agent. I'm lucky enough to get to work at home, but there were two of us. So the other guy would kind of cover for me. And then when he had to go do something, I would cover for him. Unfortunately, he put his 2 weeks notice in, and they are not filling that position. So having a job is typically good. And I don't have, I am 7 away from getting to 5,000 subscribers, but I need about 10 times that to do anything full time on YouTube. So unfortunately, I won't be consistent enough, at least for the time being, to be able to progress beyond next week. So there's opportunities to do like a special something every once in a while. Pardon me, every once in a while. Or on the, once in a while on the weekend, but a consistent Friday show for me is not a consistent show during the week period during my normal work hours is just not
in the cards.
Feasible right now.
Yeah. So here is the game plan, everyone, just to put everybody at rest before we have a riot, Tom. So Fridays from now on 9 a.m. Fridays, I will bring the pit stop back. So we'll just do the news. Obviously, Billy won't be here for that. Billy will work with his new schedule, and then he and I, Billy and I talk often. We will coordinate special edition Beyond the Sim episodes from time to time, and then if there's any kind of regularity and possibility, maybe the show will just move to a different time zone. It'll just take some time to figure those things out. But for now, I'll get the pit stop on, so we'll still have something 9 a.m. Fridays.
Yeah, I just didn't want to promise something that I wasn't going to be able to do.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to tell people, oh, in 2 weeks, it'll be back to normal. Like, that's not, in my opinion, that's not a realistic thing. And I know when I'm listening or watching people and they say, oh, I'm going to do this, and then it never happens because they have the good intention of doing said thing and then realize for whatever reason,
sure,
either in or out of their control, they can't do it. It is a little frustrating when you're like, well, you said you were going to. So I don't want to be like that. I don't want to tell people that I'm going to be able to do something when I'm not going to be able to do it.
Right.
So I would rather tell people that after next week, it's on hiatus for me. Again, special, every once in a while or on a weekend every once in a while is a completely different story, but consistently every week for the foreseeable future is not something.
So to an extent, we're going to play it by ear, everybody. And Tom, those are great ideas, but right now we're in the unknown. So right now, the promises we are making is pit stop on Friday, and tune in for more. There might be another Beyond the Sim, and who knows, maybe someday it'll have another fixed time. We'll see. We don't know for sure. So what's John Sable doing on Fridays? Like I said, more to come on that. For now, you can plan on next week there being Beyond the Sim number 39. Yes. Next week will be number 39. I think we're at 38 today, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
So, all right, now on to the Simracing news. iRacing podcast. Yeah, those copycats. They copied our podcast. I did not get a chance, but a little bird told me that F3 cars are getting or got the heat tire warmers. You think about open-wheeled racing, and nowadays it's like you don't open-wheeled race with cold tires, well, at least not in Europe.
You know what I find interesting about the tire warmers? They do help to a degree, but it's mainly the surface of the tire that it's heating, and a lot of the heat comes from the hub area,
Right.
from the brakes and
Right.
the heating up itself. So it does make a difference, but I wonder how they're going to model. This is just me spitballing here. I wonder how they're going to model if it's going to be warm and then it starts to cool, the tire starts to cool down, which is typically kind of what happens. That's why those guys are still scrubbing their tires on the warm-up lap, even though they've used tire warmers. I know that's something that I try to do, is actually ride the brake a little bit to put some heat in the brakes.
Yep.
That would help try to heat the wheels up in real life.
Robbie Unser and I were talking about that during a Hot Lap Pump Day, and he was talking about,
were you? Okay.
Yeah, and he was talking about the rubbing the tires, and he's like, no, it's internal. It's not just the surface. It's the brakes, it's the hubs, and he said the exact same thing.
Right. So I'm just curious how they're going to model it, because the surface of the tire will be warm, and then it starts to cool off immediately when you take that off. So are they just going to kind of throw that part out of the window and just say, okay, here we're using tire warmers, but really the whole tire is warm. Right. So you'll never get that like cool off period and then warm back up. So I'm just, like I said, I'm just talking out loud here. I have not had a chance to listen to this episode, but I've listened to some of the other ones and they're pretty good.
Right. I haven't listened to it either. I just got that tidbit of information. But if you want to hear, I mean, it's 56 minutes long. You've got a few things. They talk about the inaugural eSport Super Cup season, Charlotte Roval and the changes there, Throw and Go Challenge. I don't know what that is. Chris Lurch joins the show. The way they put Lurch in I wonder if he's like tall and has the name Lurch, because in the title they because they put Lurch in parentheses, and it's like,
well, I think there's more than one Chris.
Okay. Yeah, but wouldn't you just say Chris Lurch still? Like, if there's more than one Billy, I wouldn't put your name in parentheses.
Well, I probably did.
Oh, maybe there's a normal Chris.
Internally, that probably more people are familiar with.
So the other guy got stuck with the name Lurch. Yep. And he's probably like my height, and he goes by Lurch.
Oh, jeez. Tom Jones. Must live on. Thanks, buddy.
Thank you, Tom Jones. Thank you very much. What else do they talk about? Oh yeah, Thrustmaster IRX Rallycross Championships kick off next week, I believe. So good stuff. Adam's family, exactly. Billy in parentheses Strange. Yes, Stephen.
I like it.
All right, I'm going to take the next.
My name on a race car. I'm going to do that. I'm going to put my last name in parentheses.
It would work though. People would be like, "What the hell?" You know what I mean?
It's I can't tell you how often I get, "That's not your real name."
Oh, I'm sure that's got to happen. Yeah,
no, that's my name.
Too good.
Believe me, when I was in elementary school, and people would tease me about it all the time, I did not want it to be my last name.
I'm guessing that if you were to have to divide up your life with a name like Strange, that half of the time it's been to some sort of an advantage in coolness, whatever, and then the other half of the time it's been a nightmare.
Yeah, I got you learn all the jokes. Billy really is strange, you get, and it's just yes. How long did it take for you to think of that one? Good job.
Do you ever get one where you're like, oh my God, I'm such and such years old and I've actually never heard that before?
No, I'm serious. By the time I was probably in high school, I had heard every single joke about my name.
Yes, Tom, agreed there. All right, the next story I'm going to take, because I certainly have a little bit of a reputation at this point for, I hate companies that owe you real news and then just keep giving you fluff without any explanation as to why they haven't given you the promised news. I believe a certain Fana something company did something like that when we were waiting on certain software. But in this case, it's Simbin. Remember way back when they promised us a lot of news, we didn't get it. And then it was the Gamescom announcement, which already is August 20th. Discussions continue with our partners today. Release date will be confirmed when our discussions are finalized. Thanks, everyone, for your continued interest and support. August 29th, post-Gamescom, discussions are continuing with various partners. Once release date is agreed and confirmed, we'll announce it immediately. I mean, this, to me, that's like build-up. Like, okay, like, I'm going to sit here on the edge of my seat waiting. And then we find out that Dan Kamish comes by the studio a couple days ago, and now Simbin UK out and about. So here's their out and about, which are cool pictures. I'm not going to say they're not cool. But that's all we get. That's all you get to know about Simbin GTR 3 and no release date still. So that's my whole little mini rant. Just come on, give us some news already.
Right? All right. Somebody mentioned something in the chat about if you Google Billy Strange, it's either this guy from the 50s and 60s or it'll be me, one of the two. And usually it's because of my YouTube or my racing stuff. But I have something for show and tell because I just got these from my grandfather. So when you Google Billy Strange,
is this the musician Billy Strange?
Yes.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So when you Google Billy Strange, a musician will come up. He wrote like the James Bond theme. He was a big songwriter in Nashville. And that's my grandfather's cousin. So I just got these records from my grandfather. My grandfather passed away, 4-ish years ago now, almost. So I finally got these out of storage from him, and they're old records, and they're from back then. I don't know. It's kind of cool.
Oh, I'm dying to see this. I meant to ask you at some point. Well, you can't hear me now. This is great. Show and Tell by Billy Strange. Yeah, this is somewhat of a famous name, Billy Strange. So I had a buddy, and I had mentioned the name Billy Strange, and he's like, oh, yeah, I used to watch that guy Outlaw Sprint Car Race. And he wasn't talking about Billy Strange Jr. He wasn't talking about Billy Strange. He was talking about Billy Strange. And then I had done a Google and found the musician Billy Strange. And sure enough, here we are.
Okay. So I don't know. I like stuff like this. I grab stuff. These are not rare or anything, I don't think. I'm sure tons of they're out there everywhere. But I just like there's certain pieces of almost history that I like. So from my grandfather when he passed away, I got this old Kodak camera. Little reel-to-reel thing. It's super cool. The box is pristine. It's called like a Brownie or something like that.
Oh yeah, I know the Brownie.
When he was stationed in like the Philippines or something, and because he was in the Navy, and so I like stuff like that. That kind of stuff intrigues me. And the box is pristine. The camera looks brand new. I mean, I like stuff like that. So this is we got that one behind the mic now. So the one that I always remember, he was big on 12-string guitars. There's another. This one is the big sound of Billy Strange and his guitar orchestra. So like I said, he was a big songwriter. He did surf guitar. He also did several other things, but one of them was he would have a bunch of people playing. Sometimes he would literally have an orchestra with him, but sometimes the orchestra meant the sound of what he was doing on the record just sounded good. English Hits of 65.
Is this sound of I just pulled up a video. Is this him, Billy?
I can't see what you.
It'll be on YouTube. It has a very kind of like beachy.
Yes, that was one of his. So he went from writing songs for country artists, and then he maneuvered into doing the kind of surf guitar stuff. So again, the Bond theme. He wrote that. So that's what he did. So there's this one, and then the last one, and this is the one I always remember. When I was a kid over at my grandfather's house, I always wanted, when I got into guitar especially, he had all these guitars. I mean, the man had a ton of guitars, and I always thought it was really cool. I wanted, oh, look at all the Fenders and stuff that he's got. I mean, he's got I think that's he's got a couple Jazz. What are those? Jazz Masters or Jaguars? I have a Jazz Master, so these are Jaguars. But he's got some Strats on there. He did steel guitar. He did all kinds of stuff. So I don't know. Somebody had mentioned it. I just thought I'd share.
That is awesome. I it's funny you say this because I meant to ask you, because at some point I had typed in Billy, like looking for your website, and up came Billy Strange Guitarist or something. I can't remember, and I meant to ask. I'm like, I wonder if that's the same Billy Strange. And and then I knew, and it said, look at you, Billy Strange Jr. So your grandfather was a guitarist, and you're a guitarist.
My dad can't carry a tune in a bucket. My poor dad. He tried so hard. But my grandfather could play. When he was in the Navy, he learned to play a ton of different instruments. So he played the guitar, he played the drums. So he was a musician as well. But my poor dad can't carry a tune in a bucket.
But he can drive the wheels off of an outlaw sprint car.
Yes, he could.
The other half of Billy Strange Jr. Billy Strange, we'll call you from now on. Yeah, you'll be quotes instead of parentheses. So, all right, that is fascinating. Very cool, very cool. Somebody said, yes, this really is beyond the sim. Right. All right, next up, you want this one, KartKraft?
Yes, the KartKraft stuff.
Did Senior Strange know Barry Manilow? Tom Jones.
I have no idea. I never talked to the guy. I don't know, but he's if you look up his discography, he's got a ton of writing and playing credits to his name. He also did ghostwriting. So he would actually come up with the guitar riffs, and then someone would get accredited for the actual writing, because that happened a lot back then. So
shoot, that still happens a lot.
Yeah, so
like all these big stars don't write their songs anymore. Every once in a while.
Then you have wars about who wrote what. But
yep.
Yeah, there's a lot. Let's see. So it says long-awaited customization update, bringing the first batch of parts and apparel from AIM, Arai, Alpine Stars, KG, Oryx. So to begin showcasing your style, go to the pits, select your cart, choose your setup, and then browse the parts menu to equip a new component, and stay tuned for more updates with gear, from Sparko, Momo, OMP, Freeman, and more. So like you were saying, this is almost like skins for skins for karting. The fact that you can change your outfit and some of the other parts, because there's not a whole lot of body work to karts.
Right.
So this is cool.
Yeah, this is really cool. I mean, and this is when we talk about games that don't have like car packs, that we get frustrated a little bit because, wait, I don't want to just drive around with red, blue, and green cars, How about some liveries? So this is the equivalent to liveries. And more so, it's kind of like, if you come from any kind of karting background at all, it comes down, it's really some personalization too. Because you might even be able to get combinations that resembled what you ran in your day or my day, Pretty cool. KartKraft, getting better, constantly getting better. Bob, I haven't played KartKraft in a while. I've heard good things from people who are fans of that. I can't remember if it was KartKraft or the other one where it was all happening a little quickly for me, so I wasn't really enjoying some of the speed sensation. But I should take that back, because I can't remember which one it was I was playing at that time. So yeah. What else? David Hellman scores third straight USAC World Championship. I didn't say that very well, did I? David Hellman scores third straight iRacing USAC World Championship with a win at Eldora. So that means he's in the big money, right?
Yep, he's on fire.
Pretty cool. So that continues on. Gotta love iRacing, having a proper world championship in every discipline at this point. And the better thing about it, and talent good enough that you can't just show up and win it. Like, you have to be like really good to win these championships at this point.
Yeah, and they've had some races where they've put on some really good shows. I catch them when I can. The short tracks are pretty wild, but I don't know. I think I liked the program that they put together for the non-wing cars. I thought they did good.
Cool. All right. Now, speaking of watching, I believe you watched the next one.
I did. So the other day, we had the F1 2019 next, what is it, 3 rounds?
Right,
that
yeah.
They ran
yeah.
Of the esports. I have to say, I just wanted to give them a shout out. I really enjoy the production value that these guys put in. And I think the reason that I tend to watch this and the Gran Turismo stuff is because the drivers, the people that are competing, are all in the same location.
Right.
I think I favor that over everything else.
Sure.
So I was trying to figure out why I don't feel compelled to watch like some of the other esports stuff. And I try to catch it when I can, but I'm often kind of like, I'll catch it later or whatever. Often when the GT Sport and the F1 2019 stuff comes up, if I have the time, I make the effort to watch it because I do find it, pardon me again, that it's entertaining. So, yeah.
I agree. I one of the things, and I think you and I have covered this a few times, but one of the things that is kind of essential for people to tune in and watch is having some kind of bond with the personalities. You know, that's part of fanship. Like, you don't just like blindly follow something because of whatever, you know. So it's like, yeah, them being there in person gives people the ability to like and dislike certain people there, which is sort of a key element of fanship, you know. So yeah, it makes it more real, even though it's sim racing, which some people would say is fake, right? Them being there, I think it makes it a little more real. Also, in a very small way, there's just a little bit more accountability for your actions. Because if you do something really stupid, just like real racing, hey, it might end up in fisticuffs, you know? And one of these days, they will break up a fight at one of these things, just like they do in every real racing series there is on planet Earth. I hope they thought that through and have at least one security guy ready to break up the geek fight, you know, but that's the only difference.
That's funny. But yeah, I thought that they did a nice job. So, and the racing was pretty good. I liked that one of the races, I think it was the first race, one of the races rained.
Right.
Which changed the complexity of what was going on. It's interesting to see the shift in drivers that are up at the front.
Right. A total flip
from due to the change in the physics. Everybody's just up their game.
I think it's
you know, whatever it is, it's interesting. I was pretty impressed with the duo from Renault that are driving for Renault. And then they handed out some penalties, and
I heard about that.
And then there were some penalties that they didn't talk about, because all of a sudden one guy was third. I think it was the second race, and all of a sudden he was sixth. And I don't recall them mentioning what that was. But in the first race, the one guy just barely crossed over the line coming out of the pits. Look, I know a rule is a rule, but should that rule be a 3-second penalty? I don't know that it should be.
Right.
You know, maybe a second. Maybe that's because you're not going to gain a second. And maybe it should be more of a, you know, if you put 4 tires over, then it's 3 seconds. If you put 1 or 2 tires, the right side tires over, then it's a second, like something like that, maybe.
Right.
But you pretty much know that nobody's gonna, well, I say that and maybe somebody will prove me wrong, but 4 tires, you know, taking a sharp right turn at Canada, like pretty much nobody's gonna do that.
Right.
But the rule is the rule, and I applaud them for upholding the rule. I just don't know if the punishment fits necessarily the crime itself. That was my only, because they actually had a really good race up front, and they went 3 wide at one point before they did all the pit stops. And the guy that was making the pass to me actually moved over to the left and clipped the guy. And so the other guy just went into the pits.
Uh-huh.
Because it clipped his nose wing, I think. But overall, I thought they were good. I thought they were good races. They were entertaining. They were like 18, 18, and 13 laps, because I think it was Canada, Red Bull, and Silverstone.
Mm-hmm.
If I remember right. Those are the 3 tracks. So it was like 18 laps, and 13 laps. Not a long time, but they had their tire wear, so they had to take different tires. So some guys started on a different tire. And I tell you what, the Red Bull race, one of the drivers from Renault, I think both of those guys started on a different compound than everybody else, or most everybody else at the front. And at the end, they had the softer tires. And boy, they were making some moves. It was pretty good.
Was the broadcast on top of that tire difference like they are in real life broadcast?
What do you mean?
The tire differences.
Were they covering it?
Yeah,
yeah.
Okay, that's awesome.
Yeah, they were talking about the differences, and they made that a big point. And that's what I mean. Like the way they put together the quote unquote story that's happening. You know, they did keep covering Brendan, because in the first race, he came from the back and moved all the way to the front. And then because of the penalties, he ended up finishing second.
Right.
He would have been 4th, but then the penalties put him second. So they were still keeping an eye on him. That same thing happened in the Red Bull race, where he marched his way through, but then he stayed out on his tires for like 2 or 3 laps longer than everybody else. And it looked like it was going to pay off, but then it actually seemed to hurt him I think the reason he stayed out is because he looked pretty strong on the soft tires.
Uh-huh.
But when it came to the yellows, it did not seem like he had the pace as everybody else that were on the yellow tires.
Gotcha.
So I think that's why he stayed a little longer, hoping to kind of, and then the Renault guys using the reds in the last stint really threw a wrench into that, because then they came up firing through everybody. And it was just like, wow. So that was cool. I liked it. It was a good show.
That's cool. That's good to hear. I mean, to an extent, between them and GT Academy, I mean, I think that's who the two are really putting on the big show right now. You know,
I would agree.
I don't know why other ones aren't being done, because you have some others that are being done in person, but they're not putting on the same level of show.
Yeah, and I don't know. Again, I don't know why. Maybe it's because the level of the production, or I don't know, because I know there have been a couple others that have done where everybody's come together, but it feels like if you don't make as big a deal about it as like the Visa,
right,
the Vegas race, it just doesn't get pushed to the forefront.
Right. Yep, it's true. It's true. All right, with that, final little news tidbit of the day is just that the 2020 Event 4 for the qualification for next year's F1 series is 9 days, 5 hours, and 58 minutes away. So we should be seeing, round 4. So it's sort of, well, I guess this season's already getting close to the end, because I think the next event, don't they do like 4 races? And that might be it for the 2019 season.
Yeah,
if I'm not mistaken. So,
I won't speak to that one because I don't know.
Oh, we had one more story. I'm sorry. Also, this isn't new news. I've covered this on the pit stop, but this is the week of the RFactor 2 McLaren Shadow Project Qualifiers. Is round 2 in that competition. Yep. Man, esport exploded. I mean, it's like, it's not like monthly now, and it's not even weekly. It's like daily.
Yeah, again, I hope it can keep the pace that it's got. I only worry a little bit.
You only worry a little bit?
Well, it's just my concern is, again, we talk about return on investment, the ROI.
Right.
And I'm hoping, my hope is that because I feel like it's the manufacturers that are driving a lot of this, sanctioning bodies.
Right.
So I'm hoping that they're seeing the benefit from this and that it continues on at the same pace. Well, I mean, McLaren manufacturer as well, but
Yeah.
that's what I hope they're seeing something.
Well, and I hope they don't, like the F1 series is an example. The money has gone up each season by a significant amount. And it's like at some point, will they have the sense to cap it without assuming that they'll have the same rate of growth that they've been having? Because the minute they overinvest and it takes a slip, then you see a reduction perhaps in prize money, which would look bad, because it would be a changing of the tide. It would be turning for the other direction.
Right.
So I hope they stay a little ahead of it and don't just assume they're going to have the same rate of growth forever on something that's new.
Well, and that's the problem is, right? I mean, when I worked for big corporations, it was never enough, right? Hey, you
Right.
did good this year. We need more next year.
Right.
And when you didn't get more next year, you could have even done better than
Right.
the prior year. But if you didn't hit their sales goal, you got a big talking to, or you got a demotion or what have you.
Right.
And
And eventually
so
there is a cap and a limit on these things,
right. And that's what I'm saying. I hope that they are getting a return on investment, because if they're not getting one yet, how much further is this going to go to give them a return on investment, and are they willing to stick it out? That's my only
Right.
concern. I don't
Yep.
want it to fail. I'm just, like I
Right.
said, I'm just a little concerned about that aspect of it.
Yeah.
So I hope that they're getting something out of it that they deem to keep supporting.
Yeah. I will give McLaren credit for doing it in a way where, okay, so they've got their McLaren team participating over there. They're building their McLaren team through various different competitions. They've got their Rudy Van Buren. They are doing the qualifiers for the Project Shadow, which isn't like a huge paycheck. So it's something that they can probably repeat, and I think they're getting a really good bang for the buck on what's costing them to do the program and how it's bettering their esport team in the overall scheme of things. But them, and you look at them differently, because McLaren in the world of esport has become a sanctioning body and a competing team, because they're hosting their own event, McLaren Shadow. You compare that to like a William Esport, who has a team in 6 different sims, just talking to Jack yesterday. But they're all esport teams, and they're doing an academy, but they're not hosting events. So yeah, I think McLaren's probably covering their bases. It's like when you play craps and you can insure your bet,
Right.
It's like they're insuring their bet. They've got a foot in the in the pool like the other ones, but they've got a little insurance that even on a minimalistic level, they're getting good marketing return on investment for small investment. So, all right.
Yeah.
Right on. All right. Well, a couple topics that I think we'll move on to and then bring today's show to an end. But I was driving, and you drove the Porsche Cup car, Porsche GT3 Cup car. And I need a little reminder at the time, but the GT3 like RS or those are like the full modern traction control ABS level cars, but the GT3 Cup is like a good old raw Porsche.
Yes.
No traction control, no ABS. And in 2019, a car of that level, that's almost uncommon. So for somebody who's really acquainted to a GT3 car, because it kind of looks like a GT3 car, 100% looks like a GT3 car, it is not, and it does not drive anything like a GT3 car.
No, it doesn't. I mean, the last one that I can remember, I had the 2010 Viper that had no traction control in it. I don't remember if that one had ABS, but for sure it didn't have traction control. So yeah, this car is in its raw, like it's in a raw state. It is in one of its purest forms possible.
So when I was driving it against Mitchie Hoyer and his crew. And those are like RFactor 2 specialists. Being that most of them are German, I'm assuming they have a fondness for Porsches. And so I'm just like really slow. And I'm like, wow, I'm really slow in this car. I wonder who's running traction control and ABS. And then I can't remember who, but somebody was like, no, it was Sven who was hosting the room, was in our chat. And he's like, no, the Cup has none of that. And it made me think of one of those things. They're little arguments that sim racers like to have. Tim's here. H pattern. Are you really sim racing if you're not using an H pattern? And is it cheating to be using sequential shifters? And we can argue that point, and that's a valid argument or discussion. Argument, maybe too strong a wording. But when it comes to sim racing, when it comes to things that we can turn on, driving aids, and I'm not talking the over-the-top aids like the settings in the game as much as the in-the-car settings. What do you feel about using traction control and ABS to your advantage? So, I'm about to race in the GT3 car, and traction control is one of those settings. And I think a lot of sim racers are really quick to just turn off all the driving aids, to man up, to do it that way. And I'd even say that traction control is difficult for me to drive on. So anyway, I'm getting a little long-winded in what's supposed to be a question to you. Do you
That's fine. No, go ahead.
do you think there's a right and wrong to using ABS, traction control, driving aids that the car has built in versus game settings? And is it cheating? Is it right? Are you getting the most out of your sim racing experience? What are your thoughts? I mean, I think some people would argue this point.
I don't know if there's a right or a wrong answer. I would tell you what I prefer. So when I'm driving a car in a sim, I prefer to use the real world, whatever it has. That includes degrees of rotation. And I always find it funny when people, well, you're not using this and you're not doing that. I'm all, yeah, but I bet you're probably not using the correct degrees of rotation, are you? That's one of the biggest things when I run into those people, I ask, are you using the correct degrees of rotation? Well, no, because I don't like the way my hands go this far over the wheel and this kind of, okay, I'm just asking. It lets you do that. I am all for it. If the sim lets you do it, cool. I prefer to run, if I can, as close to what the car is in the real world. But if you don't want to, I mean, what if you have a rig that doesn't, you can't afford an H pattern,
right?
Or you can't afford an actual sequential,
right?
Instead of paddle shifters, right? Or you have a lower budget wheel that doesn't go 900 degrees or 1080 on the wheel, right? So those are limitations that I don't think we have to get after somebody for,
right?
But again, my preference is to try to do what the car, if I can, runs within the real world. So if the car has ABS but no traction control, that's how I drive the car. If the car has a bunch of, like a GT3 car, has traction control and ABS and fuel mapping and all this kind of stuff, that's what I run.
Right.
That's what I prefer to do. If I'm doing a competition, I would like those types of things, because then we all know kind of like we're all starting in the same box. But on the flip side, if it's not going to penalize me for using paddle shifters, if I'm in a competitive situation, right, and paddle shifters for me in that car, when I should be using like a hand sequential or an H pattern, if the paddle shifters are quicker in a competitive situation, then I'm going to run the paddle shifters.
Right.
Because it allows me to do that.
Right.
Right? There's going to be somebody else that's driving like that. Unless you have a system that will lock you out of running the paddle shifters and only running an H pattern.
Right.
Then that's what I'm going to do. But if I'm on my own, or if I'm with a bunch of friends, I'm not really being super competitive about it, I'll run what the actual car runs. So that's kind of how I feel. I don't fault anybody for using any sort of, like, if a car doesn't have traction control and they just can't get around the track without traction control. Who am I to tell you how to enjoy this fictional representation of a car? You're
Right.
you're playing with a toy car virtually. Why am I here to tell you you're doing it wrong? Hey, that's not how I choose to enjoy running my sim racing stuff. But the beauty is you get to enjoy it the way you want to.
Right. Right. Yeah, I think I agree with you there. I personally, like, I don't think I'm as good a driver in aided cars as I am in non-aided cars. So I agree with you 100%, and I wish I was better at utilizing ABS and traction control to their limits, because I maybe prefer to drive cars that don't have those things. And I think that's one of the reasons is that I can't use them to their full extent. I think it's actually a different type of driving I'm not saying it's any more or less of a driver. It's a different skill set. They talk about how certain go-karters don't always transfer to full-bodied cars so well because there are different tricks to each. Yes, you become an incredibly skilled driver in karting, but all of those skills aren't one-to-one when you get to a full-bodied car. And there are a couple of other tricks that you learn in full-body cars that some karters never get. And I almost feel like it's a similar transition going from a non-aided car to an aided car, in that not everybody transfers that well, and vice versa. And I tend to be a little bit like you in that I feel whenever I drive something that has a raw engine sound. Well, most of those raw engines are in dated cars. They're not in, because the newer cars are very clean sounding. And so the minute I'm in something raw, I instinctively wish I had a stick shift, because my brain just like, that's an American V8 that should only be driven with a stick shift, right? But that, that's just a sound thing. But when it comes to racing, like you said, on paddle shifters, like you said on wheel rotation, yeah, if we want to be purists, you better have the right wheel rotation if you're trying to be a purist. But if I'm racing, and that's not a rule set that everybody is being held to, well then, screw it. I'm going to paddle shift. Great example. There are a handful of cars in iRacing that you are actually faster in an H pattern with a clutch than you are paddle shifting with auto blip. Straight up, you are faster with the shifter. However, I personally have to weigh that against the time and cost of a missed shift. So all those fractions that I might be saving are then taken away by maybe even one single misshift, depending on what that does. If that means skipping the rear end and looping the car, if that means blowing the motor, So even though it's faster, I do have to do a little mathematics and probability of failure rate, my failure rate as a driver.
One thing I do when I feel like an H pattern is really difficult in a particular car, or maybe is not being implemented how I would like it to feel, I will use my sequential, but I'll run it like my shifter cart. I will still lift on the upshift and I'll blip it on the downshift, just like I would if I was doing an H pattern. It's just, some H pattern's tricky to me because some vehicles and some sims nail it and it feels really good. Like there's very few things that are more satisfying than nailing heel toe on the downshift and grabbing the right gears and stuff like that. But there are some other ones that I don't think do it as well, and it's either overly difficult or like it just doesn't sync right with my timing, whatever that is. So I'm just like, look, I'm not here to struggle all day long. Like, I wanted to hop in and just have fun driving the car, so I'll just put it to a sequential. I won't use the paddle shifters, but I will still use the blip and the downshift just like I would with an H pattern, and I get the same sensation from driving that.
Right.
But I mean, again, I try to stick as closely as I can with what the car would be in the real world. But
Right.
sometimes it just doesn't work, or maybe you just don't have the gear or whatever. And I don't find that a big deal.
No, and even when somebody was like, "Oh, I drive the Lotus 79 and I use my paddle shifters." Like I even have an H pattern, but I use my pattern, and it's like, well, we are racing, and the people you're competing against aren't forcing themselves to use an H pattern, and there's a reason that all modern cars have paddle shifters, because compared to a stick shift, there's no comparing the potential of paddle shifters versus a stick shift. I'm sorry, or even a sequential where you have to remove a hand from the wheel. So sure, and I think that if you were like a wealthy racer and there were no limits on your series, and even if you were in some vintage series, if you were like racing for money somehow in older cars, everyone would have put sequential shifters or paddle shifters onto old cars by now if it was that type of competitive series, winner take all.
It eliminates the possibility of an issue.
Yeah. And they'd also add traction control, and they'd also add ABS.
But that was also with the advent of those pieces of technology getting better. Back in the day, a lot of guys still preferred to use an H pattern because they were more reliable.
Right.
They could actually be quicker than either an automatic or some sort of, so that you have to take all of those things into account. We're in the virtual world. Like we don't have those same limitations. With what we're doing. So.
I think even as much as like 10, 15 years ago, you could buy like a Japanese or certain cars in America that had paddle shifters. But let's face it, it was like, or like the original Triptronic type shifters that, automatics that you could actually go through the gears. And people forget that way back when you had a column shifter, that it was actually 1, 2, 3, but the transmission still acted like an automatic. So despite you being able to control the shifts, it didn't matter what method, whether it was paddle shifters or the shifter or whatever, could have been buttons on the dash. It still did that automatic lunge type shift versus that hard shift. Well, now that, because, if you drive a modern supercar, like you have paddle shifter, there is no clutch in the car. And when you shift it, it shifts like a stick shift, not like an automatic, but the car does the whole thing. The car blips it, blips it so it can disengage and re-engage and shift the gear, instead of an automatic where you're using a giant slipping mechanism to allow for that whole thing without lifting and blipping and all that. That's basically the difference. But that slip is just a loss of power, a loss of, and I think that I think if they could put the type of shifters that are in supercars in those street cars, it would be a different, department. Now you're shifting with paddle shifters. It just it's an advantage. It's one of those things they'll never go backward on. At some point, that will be in every civilian car, and the clutch will be gone forever. Like the H pattern days are completely numbered at this point. We can talk about electric.
My Viper had an H pattern in it, but that was like the last car I know of that I even looked at that had an H pattern.
Yeah. So guys who are like wheelmen, like the days of, again, clutch. I wonder what is Heiko? What is the drifting community going to do about the fact that the clutch is going to be gone in virtually every car you can buy? Because you guys need to double clutch and dump the clutch to do half the tricks you're doing.
Yeah, they'll still have a way to put those in. I don't see,
Well, and half of those guys are in like 1990 240 SXs anyway.
What'll happen is you'll get the guys that have money that can change out all that stuff to put a clutch in.
Right.
Change out the transmission stuff.
Yep.
Or everybody will just get the older cars that have a clutch. So
there's the business model for the future. You build the clutch transmission for drifters who want to modify all cars. I don't think you have a lot of clientele, though. It sounds like an expensive business for the amount of clientele return on investment. So,
so you're talking about this. It actually brings up something that I've thought of. When I watch somebody sim race, or when somebody makes a comment about how I'm racing, the first thought I always have is, you know, especially when somebody compares speed or you're not doing it correctly, is your experience the same as my experience though? In other words, are you using the exact same things that I'm using? Are you using the same degrees of rotation?
Right.
Are you using an H pattern? Are you using, what driving aids are you using?
Right.
And a lot of times, not always, but a lot of times I find that they've changed something in their setup that allows them to have a different opinion of how I'm driving it.
Right.
So it is the reason why I have never ever gone to somebody's YouTube page and left a comment about how they're wrong or how their driving sucks or several of those variations. Not once have I ever done that.
Right.
While I may sit there and go, you might clean up your corners. Yeah, I'm serious though. You might clean up your corners a little bit. I don't know how much experience that person has. I don't know if they're using the same tools that I'm using that allows me to be more comfortable with the car. Like there's a bunch of different factors. So you made me think of, because we should be doing this because we like to do it. And we should be able to enjoy it in the manner that we want to. I've always thought about that angle when I watch somebody else drive.
Right. No, it's very valid and very relevant, because especially if you're trying to help somebody, you know, and it's like, wow,
That's
maybe
the first thing I ask. Are you using the right degrees of rotation? Because if you think about it, if they are simulating the car correctly, the geometry in the steering is made for that degree of rotation. And
Right.
if you are altering that, you will alter the speed at which the steering happens.
Right.
So it could actually be a detriment, which you are thinking that it'll help you because you don't want to turn your hands as far.
Right.
It could actually be a detriment because it's making the car too twitchy.
Sure. You take like a 72 Eldorado Cadillac or something that has like 2 turns just to get, and it's like if you gave that thing quick steering, it might just spin around on its own, because it was such a poor handling car. So again, that was built into by design for the needed stability, probably.
Seriously, when I'm helping somebody, that is one of the first things I ask is what is your degrees of rotation?
Right.
Because that will make a big difference in how you attack a corner.
Sure.
And some people like it. Some people like it where it's really narrow, and then obviously they're not asking me for help, so that doesn't apply in that scenario. But if you get what I'm saying.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just one of those areas. I think this whole topic and everything we've covered in it is one of those areas, and I want everybody to have fun in sim racing. And it's like, I don't really care what your level is or where you like to play or how you like to play it, as long as you're out here doing it. But I do see these things in the forums, or I see it in chat where people are like, oh, well, you're only fast because you're using this, or even, and what spawned this topic was me being really slow, and for a moment in time accusing everybody else of using all of the traction control and ABS, and I'm sitting there, the dummy who hasn't turned it on yet. Now, that wasn't the case. I was just slow. But that paranoia arose in my head.
Sure. Here's how I kind of judge something like that is I have my own opinion about how the car is driving, right? And then when I watch other people drive, if a small subset of people can get around the track quickly, then that car and or setup was really engineered in that sim to benefit that particular high-end level of driver, which is fine. But when I watch people drive that car, either on YouTube or in a room, I notice most people struggling. And so my point has always been, and we've talked about this before, so I won't beat a dead horse with this, but you don't go out. I've never been given a car. I've never been given a cart that tries to kill me.
Right. Yeah.
Never. Because they don't want that to happen. They want you to buy more stuff.
Right.
Right? So what is the benefit of you getting out on a track and not buying their next car or their next product, right? They want you to be comfortable in the car. Now, what the example I gave in my Discord was the only problem I've ever had was with this last cart that I purchased for road racing on big tracks. I didn't notice that the bearing collar.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You can flip that inside or outside.
Right.
That changes the stiffness of the rear axle.
Right.
I did not pay attention when I went through the cart. I just put it together the way they had it, and my dumbass did not realize that on the left side I had it flopped.
Right.
And it was different from the right side. So I went out running this cart, and I'm running like top fives. And for 2 races, we're driving courses that are primarily left-hand turns.
Uh-huh.
And I'm like 6th, 5th, and every time I go through the left-hand corner, the cart kind of gives me this little shake.
Right.
So I adjusted, right? I had to figure out how to get around that. But it didn't try to kill me.
Right.
It just made the cart not as desirable as I wanted it to be. And 2 races I drove it that way. Then we went down to what is it? What's the one by Bakersfield? Buttonwillow?
Yeah.
And I ran there, and that's primarily mostly right-hand corners. And I finished 3rd.
Uh-huh.
And the cart felt awesome. But every time I go through one of the left-hand corners, I just had to be a little careful.
Right.
And then I had the guy that got me into the road racing stuff. He comes over, he's looking at it going, I'm telling him, like, it feels weird in the left-hand corners. He's like, it shouldn't feel weird. I'm like, well, I don't know. It feels weird. Well, I'm looking at everything. I'm making sure my tire pressures are right. Well, the collar was flipped the wrong way. So it would allow the cart to flex a little bit more in the rear axle through left-hand corners, which would cause the car to do this like little shimmy going through. We flopped it over to the other side the correct way to stiffen it. I won the next race. It changed it changes the cart. But my point being is, even though that collar was installed wrong, it did not try to kill me.
Right.
I went down and ran a sprint car race. Crew chief Lee Lindgren, we went down to Tulare, and he was helping another guy at the same time, Stephen Allard, and we're down there. And Lee had turned me on to gas shocks instead of the standard shocks that we were running. Night and day. I loved the gas shocks. They were amazing. I felt like I could feel the car more. I knew what it was doing. I could be more aggressive, right? So we make that change. The other shocks didn't try to kill me.
Right.
They just weren't as good or desirable as these gas shocks.
Right.
Well, Steven was really fast, but he had been using the standard shocks. Lee gives him a set of the rear shocks that are gas, and he hates them. Right? He can't stand them.
Right.
So they put the other shocks on. That is a difference in driver.
Right.
So that's a change in driving style. That is not a change in, oh my God, I'm not going to die. Please help me, to, okay, finally I can get around the track without feeling like I'm going to kill myself.
Right.
And what was funny is the first day I was terrible. I messed up qualifying. I did terrible in my heat races. It was an embarrassment. The year before I did really well, and that time I was like, there's like 80 some odd cars there, and I'm like not dead in the back, but I'm not doing well.
Right.
So it's a 2-day show. We go to the next day. I go out for hot laps, and Lee goes, let me try something. So he makes a shock adjustment setting. I go out for hot laps, and the car feels amazing. I'm like 2nd quick in my hot lap session. I end up being 5th quick out of everybody in hot laps over all 80 something cars. And so like, I'm all pumped up. I get in there, and Lee walks over to me, and he kind of like pokes me in the shoulder, and he's got this crap-eating grin on his face.
Uh-huh.
And he's all, you like that, huh? I was like, dude, whatever you did, it was amazing. He's all, it's not what I did. He points to the left. He taps me on the shoulder, points to the left rear shock. On the bottom, the titanium bolt to mount it, completely busted off.
Oh, my.
I had no left rear shock while I was racing, while I was doing hot laps. I don't know what is happening, right? I'm a driver. I adjust to what's going on. You could tell me that it has the most special compound. This is what I was getting at with Steven, was you could tell me you have the best special compound tire and the best engine and blah, blah, blah. If you go out and drive it and it doesn't feel good, it doesn't matter. It
doesn't matter.
Numbers don't matter.
Right.
That's it. It doesn't. I can't describe it any other way, right? I went out there. I had no clue that the left rear shock broke off after the first 3/4 of a lap on the bottom side. I knew something felt a little different, but I thought it was me. So I was like, well, I'm just going to adjust. And I fired right through. And it was funny because he's like, well, obviously what I was going to do didn't mean anything anyways, because the left rear shock wasn't on the car and you still drove. And, so that's that kind of thing. And so I had made and I actually had a conversation with Marcel, a long conversation with Marcel. And I had just kind of posed the question. I said, I believe that your numbers are correct. The data that you've gathered is correct. There are certain intangibles that every developer has to fill in the gap because there's no way to simulate everything, which he agreed with. But they believe that their version is correct, and that's fine. I just kind of went, I think that sometimes the way you guys set up a car really favors something that's not neutral, because I felt the same way about the Aston Martin GTE. It was very on the nose of the car.
Right. And
so for a Rudy Van Buren, these high-end level guys that love RFactor, they love the way that car is going to drive because that's what they enjoy. But you're talking about a very small subset, a very small margin of people.
Right.
Those guys already know how to set up a car
to
the way they want it to perform. So what I was trying to get at is, why not have the car a little more neutral so that everybody that purchases the car can enjoy it, and then they can mold those guys that really know the setup and like that certain way of driving. They already know how to change it to that.
Right. Sure. So if RFactor car came out of the box with a neutral setup, and that was the kind of by default, you could assume that every alien of RFactor would know, hey, before you even take it out, go ahead and drop the front springs by 400 pounds, or,
take some camber out, drop the air pressure, whatever,
and which in iRacing is kind of more the case if you think about it, because it's like most aliens before they even got it, well, let's go ahead and drop, well, they're fixing that now slowly, but just drop the air pressure, drop the springs, get it as low as you can get it to the, it's like the ABC of getting a fast setup for an alien driver. All right, continue. Sorry.
No, that's it. It kind of melds together because we were talking, you kind of started with the example of the Porsche Cup car. So it was just,
do you remember the Skippy way back when in iRacing before they made so many changes? The Skippy had so much off-throttle oversteer that the Skippy was like one of the hardest cars to drive in all of iRacing.
I steered clear of the Skippy for a long time because of that. And again, you got Dave Kimmer that drove that car telling you, well, that should be the way the car drives, and you're like,
no,
okay,
no, I worked at Russell Racing, and
the funny part is it changed, right? It's been changing along the way.
Oh, it handles nothing like the original Skippy now. Now it handles like I feel it should. Right. When I worked at Russell, we had a Mitsubishi version of the exact same car as the Skippy, and it had a little bit of throttle oversteer, off-throttle oversteer. But the minute you did anything at all, it corrected itself. So all you had to do, internet.
Oh, there we are.
There we are. Internet flash.
And I was about to go take a bathroom break.
Yeah, I thought that was like, this made a noise first, and I'm like, that's weird. But yeah, I'm like, also, this is like a school car. If a Skip Barber car was this likely to crash, they wouldn't have a racing school. They'd have a mechanic training program, because that's all they'd be doing is fixing cars all day long. And then the other thing is, when you go to a driving school, they usually have an insurance policy, and not everybody pays for it. You'd have far too many people bankrupting the school, not paying their bills on crashed cars if they just crashed every 3 laps like they originally were. So I applaud them on doing that, but it was the exact same scenario that you're describing, where it's like, wow, this car just wants to kill me or kill itself, and there's nothing I can do to tame the beast. And it makes me feel like I don't know what I'm doing. And I kind of think of myself as being an okay driver. I'm not saying I'm great, but I'm okay. I don't crash cars for a living. I race them for fun.
And I can tell when I'm underutilizing a car. To your point, though, I can also tell when I'm underutilizing a car. I made this point as well. Is there's a reason that I don't typically review like an LMP car.
Right.
I'm not real great at that style of car because I tend to underdrive those things. I watch some of these other guys run like a Jimmy Broadbent and some of these other guys that are, in fairness, they're pretty good with those cars. I'm nowhere near at that level. So I tend to not have that same strong of an opinion on cars like that. And so I can drive it and I can still have fun, but I'm not going to sit here and tell you, oh, that doesn't feel right or this does feel right, because I can tell if I am or am not driving the car to what I feel is a competent and capable expectation.
Right.
So it's interesting. Like you drive that car, and then you drive all these other Porsche Cup cars, and you're like, even if this is correct, right? Why does this one drive so different than all the other cars?
Right.
And
all the other ones kind of have a common theme about them.
Right. And if it's a tire compound problem, right? Well, then how come you're not using the same compound of tire that those guys are? Or how come the option isn't there?
Right.
Which I don't know if that is or is not the issue. I'm just saying, if we're going to point to that thing, right, then why not make it? Again, this goes back to testing everybody else's stuff.
Right.
Why not have that compound available?
Right. Or why not have yours drive remotely like the gang, if this is the general consensus?
If you drive the race room car, right, it's a little more, I would say, extreme than the other versions, but to me, it still makes sense. It's not quite as planted, but it's still, especially after they made this update, it's still pretty good. And my question was just, this one is take out if it's good or bad. It is definitely different. So what is so different about this car? And it's just one of those things. And it was like, I had a comment. I'm trying not to get too deep into this because I don't want to spark like fire and outrage, but I had a comment about using the Nordschleife, and I shouldn't have used the Nordschleife. Well, number one, I didn't say that I used the Nordschleife to test. That never came out of my mouth. What I said is that I was going to show off the Nordschleife and Le Mans in the background.
Right.
But I do all my testing at Zandvoort, and then because the Nürburgring GP track was new, I did some testing on the Nürburgring GP track. So that was my test bed. But the other thing I started thinking about is, so for all those people that love the Nordschleife, are you telling me that they can't run this car on the Nordschleife? Like, that doesn't make sense either.
Right.
Huh? Funny thing is, I actually thought the car felt a little better on the Nordschleife than it did running on the GP style tracks.
Right.
I was actually a little more comfortable with it on that track than I was the other ones.
It kind of needs the nimbleness, or it can utilize the nimbleness better than the precision aspect of a GP type track.
It's got a lot of different stuff going on the Nordschleife. So it's a broad range of things that I don't know. It just that particular car just brought up some interesting topics and ideas that we've touched on before, but it made you think that when you drove the car, you didn't feel like you knew what you were doing, and it's obvious that other people could drive the car.
Right.
Although I would say that I saw a lot of people, even the fast guys, struggle to keep it on the track for more than a handful of laps.
Right. But, if they could tame
people are testing the limits.
Yeah, if they could tame the beast, they could post a lap. That doesn't mean they're driving consistently well with the car. Getting back to something you said, I think it's kind of brilliant that you have a test track so that you can get a good feel for different cars. Does that mean when there's a new track, you have a car that you go to as your test car?
Yes. I will typically run a couple different cars. I will run a car that doesn't have a more classic car that doesn't have traction control and stuff like that. And then I will run a more modern car that I know I feel comfortable driving with, to give me, just to learn. It's really not even to test. It's more to learn the track, learn the corners.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. So
awesome. Well, it sounds like we were pretty much in agreement about that Porsche.
If you enjoy the car, more power to you. I think that's great. That is the reason we have so many options available to us and so many sims available to us.
Right.
But I'm not going to stray from my opinion, especially after talking with Marcel, that to me, this version drives very different.
Yep.
And I have a hard time believing that when I drive some of these other cars, I feel so connected to it. And then this car, I don't.
Right.
And if this was the only version of the car, I would have just said, this car isn't for me. I'm obviously just not equipped or don't mentally have my head around driving this car. That's something else we don't really talk about. Confidence inspires speed. If you don't have the confidence, you're not going to drive the car quickly.
Sure, that's exactly what was happening to me.
You're not going to you're going to try to make adjustments, but you may not make the right adjustments. If the car is so ill handling, it kind of leaves you in this ambiguous place of, the car is so far out to lunch. What do I do with it?
Right. Well,
I've made a car do that. Because of a dirt track, I've definitely gone the wrong way with the adjustments, and I'm out to lunch with the car. And next time I'm like, don't do that again.
Right.
That was a stupid move on my part for the setup. Don't do that. But it's like the gas shocks thing I was talking about with the sprint car. I was doing pretty good to that point. When he gave me those gas shocks, it inspired so much confidence in me. I could drive the car into the car or corner harder. The confidence part, we kind of forget about. You hear about what changed with so-and-so, and they often talk about once you get your first win, the wins will start coming more frequently. It's breaking through. And why is that? It is because of confidence.
Sure.
Your confidence is now boosted. I am a race winner. I'm a top qualifier. I can win whatever. I'm a top 5 driver. My confidence is now raised through the roof. And you will find that those people, when drivers lose confidence, it's because they start finishing in the back.
Right. Or getting crashed out Right.
And so it's a self-perpetuating thing, and it's a hard thing to break through. So you should want your cars to inspire confidence, not fear.
Right. Steven said, great quote. A driver should never have to think, oh no, a corner.
That is perfect. Oh no, a corner. I like that.
At the beginning, we were talking about Nordschleife. We were talking about Bathurst and the tremendous, wonderful challenge that they present a driver. And I step up to that challenge. And if I were to get in the Mazda, MX-5, for example, and go to a track, I have so much confidence in my ability to drive that car, getting back to your word confidence, that my first move in the Mazda is finding how early I can get on the gas and how much counter steering it takes to counteract that early throttle. Because even the Mazda will step out if you get on the gas soon enough. And to me, that's the kind of challenge as a driver that I like. The kind of driver challenge that I don't like is, oh my God, how do I find the right amount of delicateness that it takes to get this car to turn in without doing something completely silly, whether it be ass around into the wall, whether it be just so much grip that I'm like steamrolling apexes. But it's like, my challenge of a driver should not be so much taming the untamable. I want to have a car that I can push to the point of untamable, but that should be a challenge put to me when I start overdriving the car, not the inherent quality, just trying to save it. Oh no, a corner is not the answer for any driving machine, you know?
Well, and there's obviously levels and lines to this. I mean, an older car, I kind of gave the example of a 60s F1 Grand Prix car. A Grand Prix car. I expect it to do these things, right? I expect the car to get sideways a lot. I expect me to lock up the tires and have to learn where the lockup is. I expect those things out of an older car. But you can figure it out.
Right.
You can still understand what the car is doing. And so that I was like, there's a time and a place. And a car like this to me this is not the time or the place for it to handle quite like it does. I mean, we can point, I always think of the example of, I think it was Jackie Stewart was racing in the Can-Am Group 7 series. And one of the Lolas that he was driving was like the 260. I can't remember. I think it was the L&M car, if I'm not mistaken. But that car had what I call a bull nose to it, very round and to a point. That car was designed to go faster than hell in a straight line, but they didn't really think about the cornering. They literally said that they weren't too worried about the cornering because, well, Jackie Stewart can just get it through the corner. I think it was him. I hope it was him. He hated it. He said, this thing is literally trying to kill me. I will not drive this car until you guys make a change. And they put this big old cow catcher of a nose wing on the car. And he still hated it, but at least he could get it around the track.
Right.
Those kinds of things. I mean, he literally said, I'm not driving this car until you guys make a big change, because literally the guys that were designing that car didn't really take into account that, well, if we just make the corner, then we'll just kill everybody down the straightaway.
Right.
I mean,
yeah, and here's Jackie. Oh no, a corner.
Yeah. I can see him. I can see that quote being printed on the steering wheel when it goes away from center, or have it on your glove, so that when it comes up it says, "Oh no, a corner," every time you go to turn the wheel. That would be great.
Oh, not the car you want to be in, not the car. Oh, too funny. Awesome. Well, anything else on your mind, Billy? We hit the 2-hour mark. I can't believe it.
I didn't even realize it was that far, but yeah, no, I think like I said, I think it goes back to the great part about this hobby is you should get to enjoy it how you want to enjoy it. So if somebody likes something different than I do, if somebody, likes using a different degree of rotation, like, I am not here to be your police. I am not here. I can give you my opinion and say, I really think you should try driving with the correct degrees of rotation. But if you don't like that, then sure, don't do it.
Right. Yeah, you don't have to. Yeah, I agree. I agree completely. Whatever it takes to make you happy doing your hobby. And I mean that beyond even just sim racing. I will always take up the, people want to argue over whether like the Mazda MX-5 is a cool car for the road or not, and you get made fun of, and we've had that discussion. It's like, you know what? I'm not going to say whether it is or isn't, but I'll tell you this, if it makes you happy, that's awesome. Different strokes for different folks. And I when it comes to an opinion,
We're not here to give you confirmation bias. I am not here to make you feel good about what you've purchased or what you have not purchased.
Right.
I'm here to be informational. This is my take. I use me as a barometer to make your purchasing decision. If you don't always agree with me on this style of car, then realize that if I don't like it,
right,
you'll probably like it.
Sure. When you can, and if you watch your stuff enough, you'd be able to calibrate yourself to be able to read between the lines on your thoughts and opinions on something. And I think that if you're a fan of any type of reviewer, like if I watch a movie reviewer that I like their opinion on movies, but I know that when it comes to action movies, they always roll their eyes and say, oh, Wonder Woman, whatever, they don't like the Marvel movies, whatever, I get it. But I happen to like them anyway. I can still appreciate that reviewer. I just kind of don't listen so much when they're talking about those action movies.
I do that all the time with games that I watch, and I will I'm interested in opinion. I don't need you to make me feel good about my purchasing buy, but I'm still interested in somebody's opinion. And I know that when I watch certain reviewers, I might just watch it just for a piece of entertainment value rather than listening and like hanging on every word and getting upset if I like what they say or not. I know that particular style of game, I differ on that person with. So I watched this guy, Carrick from ACG. I love the way he does his reviews, regardless of if I agree with them or not. I just like the way he does his reviews. And some of his reviews I watch for entertainment rather than informing me on my purchasing decision, because there are certain styles of games that he and I just have a difference of an opinion on. But then I know when he gets to other styles of games, I will really take what he says into consideration. I will sit there and go, I usually agree with him on this style of game or on these points. And he's saying things that make me kind of question if I should really get this or not.
Right.
And that's what there's not a lot of people. The reason I started going back to reviews is there's not a lot of people giving an informative review. There are a lot of people that are doing streams or just kind of like a quick gloss over. But when I'm doing a review, whether it's just on a car or on a whole game, I want to give you things that I think are important.
Right.
And like when I started starting with ACC, when I started really reviewing games, I go through the options menus. To me, that's important. Like,
right.
Some people don't give a crap, and that's fine. But to me, that some of those options are pretty important to me. And so I'm just trying to inform. I'm trying to give out information so that people have a better idea of whether they agree with me or not, if they should make a purchasing decision.
Right.
On, if they should actually purchase or give it a pass.
Yep. Well, yeah. And I think that's valid. And I think anybody who watches any kind of reviewer needs to have that kind of calibration. It's a calibration to an extent, or a filter where again, where do I share common views with this reviewer on a consistent basis, and where do we differ? And even if we're talking hardware, it's like at this point, people should know the things that I'm more passionate or more concerned about, and things that I take maybe more lightly. But if their views parallel mine, that's great. If we're close, but there's a few differences, then they need to make that calibration. And in some cases, maybe they often disagree with me, but maybe it's the entertainment value that they tune in for. That's probably very unlikely, but I mean, I'm just saying.
I like I said, it's kind of interesting. I get the point where you so strongly disagree with something that you literally can't stop yourself from saying something out loud.
Right.
Like watching something on the screen, I've done it. I sit here and watch somebody, I'm like, that's not right. Why are you saying that? I really need to go on and like tell that person that they're incorrect. Like what good is that doing me? Because this is their opinion, even factually, if it's wrong, is what I'm saying going to get out in a comment to the people that need to hear it?
Right.
And what I am saying, is that going to change now? Now, if we're having a dialogue, if we're having a conversation, that is a completely different story, because then we can exchange ideas and we can sit here and we can say, oh, I see where you're coming from. That makes more sense than how I've done that before. I've listened to somebody and gone, oh, okay, well, I'm an idiot then because I didn't even think about it that way. That's the kind of the kind of back and forth I wish we could have. And the problem is I can't talk to everybody, and we can't talk to everybody. So it's kind of like, I can do my best.
Right.
Here's your information. That's it.
That's it. Oh, Devin, are you right? Are you not entertained? Be sure to like the show. Be sure to subscribe to the channel. Be sure to email Billy's boss telling him to give him Fridays off or hire a second employee. Be sure to email Dan's boss, apparently is where everyone's going, getting him Fridays off. And most importantly, be sure to tune in next Friday for what will be the last scheduled, I use that word scheduled.
Correct.
Scheduled Beyond the Sim. I will do a pit stop starting in 2 weeks to keep us entertained on Fridays. And we'll make sure and check in with Billy to find out when we can get another Beyond the Sim on the books. And maybe even find another permanent time. Who knows? You'll just have to keep tuning in to find out more. Check out Billy Strange at Billy Strange Racing on YouTube. Help him get to 50,000 subscribers so that he...
How about I'll settle for getting to 5,000. Like 4 or 5 away.
But yeah, unless you have any more, I think that's going to do it for today. Yeah, Billy?
I'm good. Everybody just have fun driving what they want to this weekend.
Yes.
Or don't be afraid to go outside either. I do have to say, I'm very lucky in the spot that I live because I get all 4 seasons here, and it's getting cooler outside. The leaves are starting to change color. I love this time of year, and I think I'm going to do a video on why this time of year makes me think of and is my favorite time for sim racing / racing games.
Do you prefer fall to spring?
I do. I love fall.
See, we don't get any color change here, so they're kind of like mirror. It's like, do you like the one that's going towards cold or the one that's going towards hot?
Right.
I prefer going towards cold, so I'm more of a fall guy because spring is beautiful, the same beautiful as fall for me here in LA. Yes. But the days of hell are coming. So now I'm into that, hell is over, and now, I'm on, well, I don't want to make the world upset with me, but, I will be looking at 74 to 78 degrees for, 4 or 5 months straight. Just every day, blue sky, 74 to 78, unless some phantom rainstorm comes in. Yeah,
spring, I mean, look, I like spring, I like summer, I like winter, actually, and again, it's because of my particular location. I get all 4 seasons. I don't get 2 or 3 seasons kind of feel the same and then one feels different. We get all 4. So I get lucky in that respect. And I've got where I live, I'm lucky enough. I've got great places where we've got tons of trees that cover the road. And so you get this really cool mix of these great fall yellow, oranges, and reds in the leaves on the trees. And everything is starting to turn green again because it's not as hot. So I enjoy this time of year.
We can only get 2 seasons.
Here.
Yeah.
I could see that.
It's not super exciting. And I hate summer. But that's because I live in the desert, essentially. It's too hot. I don't like hot. I've learned that my temperature comfort zone is down to about 6 to 8 degrees at this point. Anything too hot or too cold. I think that's a sign of getting old, by the way.
The older you are, the more narrow your temperature range and tolerance is.
I just remember when I was young, I walk around in winter in shorts and it was no big thing. Now I'm like, oh my God, it's 68. Where's my knit cap?
Oh, jeez. Man, when we did the backpacking thing, the first night it got to about, I think it was 42, 43 when we were up in the mountains.
Right.
That was perfect. Like, it was inside the tent. It wasn't cold, but I wasn't hot. Like, it was
Right.
great. The next 2 nights, it got down to like 36.
Uh-huh.
And that started to border on the line of, okay, it's a little chilly. Like, I put on my cap, and then I really got into my sleeping bag. I put on my jacket and got in my sleeping bag. And I was like,
Yeah.
okay.
Awesome. Well, great show, Billy. I had a lot of fun today. We had a lot of diversions.
Me too. I'm
certainly beyond
glad we
sim.
got to do it, because we haven't done it for 2 weeks.
Yeah, exactly. So again, be sure to like, subscribe, thumbs up, do all that good stuff. Check out Billy Strange Racing on YouTube. And that's going to do it for today's show. Of course, it's Friday. Have a great weekend, everybody. Get out there, do some sim racing. Tune in tomorrow at 6:30. We'll be going live with 10 hours of the Petite Le Mans.
Good luck, by the way.
Thank you.
Have fun.
We're in the Ferrari again, the Ferrari GTE? GT3? I can't remember which one. GT3. So, yeah, Ferrari GT3. So, anyway, should be fun. Should be an exciting race, and you'll have a whole cast of characters in on that one. But that's going to do it for today. Thank you for being here, everybody. Thank you for being part of the show and hanging out, chit-chatting, talking about sim racing. That's going to do it. This is Beyond the Sim. I'm Shaun Cole. That's Billy Strange, and we will see you on the track.
Yep. Thanks for hanging out, everybody.